once the mindset is kind of addressed, it's addressed throughout the whole process when I work with people, because you can't just switch it off. You have to understand when it starts to creep up on you, when it's impacting answering questions as you go through the process that identify what are your must-haves. So it's really understanding the skills, the must-have skills you need to use, the people you need to work with, the working conditions that are so important for people with ADHD. And that safekeeping self part that you're talking about will creep up in every aspect of that.
There are opportunities for our work and careers everywhere, if you know where to look. That's easier said than done, especially in our fast-paced and constantly changing world. Ann Faremouth is talking to experts, employers, and job seekers to bring you insight and understanding about what's possible. This is Career Can Do, where we're navigating the new work world.
Welcome to the Career Can Do podcast, a top global podcast dedicated to helping you navigate the new work world. My name is Ann Faremouth, and I'll be your host for this episode today. And I am just delighted because the guest on my show really resonates with a quote from a famous inventor that I hold dear, and that is Henry Ford. He said, "Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right." Shell Mendelson has a master's in counseling with an emphasis on career and has helped hundreds of individuals and young adults over the past 35 years find a fulfilling and sustainable career direction. Shell is the author of the book, A Course for ADHD Adults and Teens, Unlock Your Career Path. Shell herself was diagnosed with ADHD late in life. And what she does and what her book aims to do is to help adults and teens develop confidence in taking the clear next steps in their career. And I thought this was such a significant topic today because as a recruiter for almost 35 years, I see the challenges in the new work world, and people like Shell can really help those people out there. So after that incredibly long introduction, without further ado, help me introduce Shell. Shell, say hello to everybody.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for having me, Ann. I'm very excited to be here and to talk about career.
Well, it is so wonderful to have you here. I feel like your work that you're doing is not just a guide for people, but it's really a lifeline for navigating career complexities. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this and how it all got started.
I've been involved in all things career for about 35 years. And after I call it the wayward years in my 20s where I didn't know what I wanted. I had a master's degree. I had a teaching credential. I was flailing. I didn't know really what direction I wanted to take. I had a boyfriend who was applying. He was very neurotypical. Okay. And he was applying to every top university in the country, the Harvards and Yales. And I was watching him go through this process, and he did it with such diligence, and he was so on target. And he knew what he wanted. He was so clear about what he wanted. And I thought, how does he do this? I mean, first of all, the application process was insane, but just watching him go through this step by step. And I remember I sat down with him because I just didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was going to do. And he just looked at me and very simply said, "What do you really want?" It was like the simplest question in the world, but in my entire life, no one had ever asked me that question. Straight up. Not my parents, not my teachers. Nobody ever said, "What is it that you want?" And I knew exactly when he said that, what I wanted. And I knew I had to apply for a counseling course at the university and get a master's degree in some form of counseling. I just knew it. I don't know why. It just sort of came to me. I was very lucky, I think, compared to a lot of people who have to go through the process that I introduced them to. But I was lucky. I knew I had to get that master's. I knew I wanted to be a professional. I didn't want to be a subordinate kind of employee anymore. I wanted to have my own office, wear my suits. And, I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and that was the thing then. And so I applied and I got in, and it turned out that my brain is always thinking practical. And I was so ready to go to work. I was 29 at the time. And I said, I am ready just to find something that's going to plug me right into the work world. And there were two programs in counseling. One was general counseling, where I would have to compete with a gazillion women. So diversity was not even a thing. Or I could go into vocational rehabilitation counseling, which was the same thing with the addition of working with individuals with disabilities to help them find appropriate and suitable work within their disability that they could do, within their limitations for disability, whatever, however you want to put it. I asked the guy that interviewed me, I asked the professor when I was in my interview, how many people got jobs? And he said, there are only 27 people in the program. That was a plus. 27 out of 27. I said, I'm in, please accept me. And I did. Yeah. So that was the start of my whole trajectory into the world of work. Starting with working with disabilities. So I was getting that experience in terms of career and matching people up with the right careers who had limitations. They were physical, mental, emotional limitations. ADHD was not a thing then. It was not a well-known diagnosis. People were not diagnosed with ADHD at that time that I was aware of. And if they were, it was some far off thing that nobody really understood. And so I went undiagnosed through my whole program. It was very challenging, but I finally ended up going from hating what I was doing, working and getting fired from all these jobs in my 20s that I hated because I hated it. With ADHD, if you don't like what you're doing, and people who have ADHD know this, that if you don't like what you're doing, if you are not connected to it in some way, it's the wrong fit for you. You're going to find ways to either get fired, take off and job hop or something. And that happened to me. I didn't understand that it was the ADHD and not liking what I did, but I knew I had to like what I did.
A lot of what you do, Shell, I think is about mindset. And I think, we can look at ADHD as a blessing or a curse. In my research, and I do a lot of research because I write for a lot of different publications and different things, some of the most well-known people that have done fabulous things have been diagnosed with ADHD, like Bill Gates, Walt Disney, Leonardo da Vinci, Mozart, John Lennon, Thomas Edison.
How many of them had degrees?
I don't know. I don't think that's something else that I deal with. A lot of my clients say, they have to have degrees. They have to have degrees. I mean, let's look at Bill Gates and, so many of these other people that have done amazing things. Some of those guys have degrees, but look at what they've done. But I think what I'm trying to say here, the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of what you do is help people, I think, with mindset and to be in alignment with who they are and find a career path that resonates with them. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's a process of breaking things down. But mindset, we call it something a little bit different because I was trained by Richard Bowles, who wrote What Color Is Your Parachute? And he introduced me to the concept of safekeeping self. And that's the part that always wants to take us back to status quo. No matter what we're doing, it's very hard to break out of it when you have all these voices and opinions and people coming at you saying, what if you use this skill and you're so great at this, and have you tried this, and I could introduce you to somebody who blah blah blah. We're very obstinate, we're just going to shut that stuff out, but we don't understand how to get to the next point. But we also still carry those voices along with us, and that's what you're talking about. That is exactly what I'm talking about.
And I think we have to reprogram our mind first. Yeah. It might be different, but different sometimes is good. All right. We don't like maybe process information or handle tasks the way some others do, but sometimes that's not all bad. But I think what you do is you help people become positive about who they are and what they can do. And then you help them align with a career path that fits them. Because what you just said earlier on, if they feel good about what they're doing and it resonates with who they are, then they're going to be happy in the job. They're going to make a contribution. They're going to be productive. If they're not, like you just said, all right, they're going to have 10 jobs in 2 years.
Yeah. And what you said also is once the mindset is kind of addressed, it's addressed throughout the whole process when I work with people, because you can't just switch it off. You have to understand when it starts to creep up on you, when it's impacting answering questions as you go through the process that identify what are your must-haves. So it's really understanding the skills, the must-have skills you need to use, the people you need to work with, the working conditions that are so important for people with ADHD. And that safekeeping self part that you're talking about will creep up in every aspect of that. So as we're going through the process, we're addressing when is it coming up? And I can tell when it's coming up with people. I can see it's clear as day. And I can get, kind of nail them on it a little bit in a good way and tell them this sounds like safekeeping self. But once they identify these must-haves, then they have to learn to own them. And that's the part where the mindset also needs to come into play. Like owning what you know is right for you, even if it's completely different than anything you've ever been taught or ever done or ever been told. That's tough. That's tough. And that's kind of what we go through and how we work through it step by step.
Talking about steps, you talk in your book about 5 steps to self-accommodation in the workplace. You don't have to tell us all 5, but why don't you tell us a couple of steps? What kind of steps are you suggesting?
Well, first of all, you need to identify all the conditions that you don't like, that don't work for you, all those, and I call them physical and non-physical conditions. Creating a self-accommodation plan is first, it's like looking at what you don't want first and what has never worked for you and has literally gotten in the way of your progress, your productivity, your good feelings about your work, all of it. All those things that have gotten in the way, you list them and then you turn them around, each one of them into something, the other side of that for you. And then you prioritize the ones that are the most important to be aware of in your work environment. And by physical, I mean like literally all the details, your surroundings, your office, your window, the paint on the walls, the floors, the lighting, the noises. And we're very sensitive, right? We're very sensitive to noises, to sounds. I mean, some people have different sensibilities that impact them. It's really getting some clarity about what works and what doesn't work for them. And this is nothing that anyone but they can evaluate. So the process that I use in those questions involve going through that process. And also, the truth is, if you don't enjoy the work you're doing, it doesn't matter what your accommodations are, they're going to suck. They're not going to be good. That's something that needs to get evaluated. Do you need to figure out, basically, go through a process to identify what areas really are going to work for you? So it's all about you. It's all about, to use kind of a trite term, empowering the person to really say, this is who I am. This is what I want. And to go into like an interview and knowing who you're talking to, why you're there, the right questions to ask, the best way to sift and sort whether or not this is the good option for you. Because if it's not, it's better to say, no, this isn't going to work for me, because ultimately they'll end up getting fired anyway, or they'll end up. So why go through that soul crushing kind of experience? My goal is to help people not have those experiences by knowing what they want, going into interviews and starting companies or starting their own businesses with a lot of confidence and power behind them. Yeah. Clearly understanding and being able to articulate the area they want to go into, the area they want to explore. And ADHD people are typically very creative thinkers. So creativity in all its various forms, including brainstorming, strategizing, the arts, of course, for some people, but creativity and flexibility are two of the things that always come up. Creativity, it's got to be a flexible environment. For a lot of people, some people need hybrids of working from home and from the office, but they need to know if that's what they actually need to be the most productive. Then they can have a conversation with the employer that says, under these conditions, I will be like your top employee. They can actually say that because now they've really identified what the conditions are that will give both the employer and them the experience they need to do their very best.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. A lot of people that I've read about that are ADHD adults choose self-employment and or entrepreneurship. Why do you think that is? And let me digress here for a second. I want you to answer that question. But, as a career consultant, I've had candidates come to me and say, Marianne, I really don't want to work with somebody else. I want to work for myself, and I want to be my own boss. I get it. I understand that. However, I think if you have the experience of working in corporate America, you can even be more valuable as an entrepreneur or self-employment person. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, or working for someone who can help you lay the foundation and understand the industry, understand whether it's corporate America, a nonprofit, whatever it is, a way for them to. I do think that, and that's what I did. I worked for employers for 5 years before I went off on my own. But I always tell people, who come to me, it's not, if not now, at some point, you are going to want to be independent. Almost all of us need to be independent at some point. And it could be 10 years down the road. It could be 20 years down the road. But at some point, we are going to want to take off. And we just have this natural thing of really not wanting to have to answer to other people necessarily. We want to create our own rules and regs. We want to be the ones kind of in control of everything so that we can have our environment the way we need it. We can be doing the kinds of things we want and get the supports that we need personally. So those things actually become important, but for people starting in like a whole new field, needing some training, they might need to get some training, either some type of college training, but it needs to be like very specific to this is what I need in order to get this kind of work. In order to go into the field, I have to get this kind of education, right? So that needs to come first. What do I need to get myself to the point of employability or sustainability in my work? And that can come in many forms, like I said. But for people with ADHD, there's always some need to have some amount of independence. So, for example, for myself, and I was undiagnosed, but I just knew this. I had a really good, strong kind of gut feeling about things. I knew that if I were working for an employer, it had to be an employer who gave me a lot of leeway and allowed me to do things my way to a certain extent. I had to do the work, but I had to do it in a way which meant sometimes I wasn't in the office. I was like writing reports from home, even way back in the day before people were working from home. And they saw the work product, and I went from being kind of fired from all these jobs to like a superstar with my employers because they accommodated me when they saw that I was the right fit for this kind of work. They got it, that I was going to make them money. I was going to, do the things that they ultimately wanted me to do, but how I did them, they didn't question me as much on that. And there were some things that I was just like very promptly, HR people are not going to want to hear this, but I didn't want to, I wouldn't fill out certain forms, but I just wouldn't do it because I didn't see that it was relevant to my work.
Yeah.
And I remember my manager came in to me and said, this was like a corporate wing it was a wing of a big insurance company. And she came in to me and she said, you're supposed to do these weekly reports. Why are you doing these reports? And I said, I'm not going to do the reports. That's what I said. I'm not doing them. And she just looked at me and goes, oh, and walked out.
What I'm hearing though, and I understand what you're saying, that there's some certain characteristics these people have, they want to do their own thing. However, at the end of the day, in my opinion anyway, life's about relationships. We have to get along.
Right.
We have to do.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that if people understand that, but you're working for them, you make sure you're in alignment with who you are and the right job and all that. I get it, but you got to do what you got to do to get the job done, right? Now, I think that your book and what you're doing, Shell, is so necessary, more now than ever, because I think people that are having challenges or, they're not being able to get promoted or stay on a job and they keep getting let go and let go and let go. I think at some point when they come to you and they say, I don't know what's wrong with me, do you suggest to them, because we're getting near the end here, but do you suggest to them that they get tested or what do you tell them?
I think for people that come in that suspect, and I do have quite a few people who think they have ADHD, and I always say if it looks like a duck, but I really do highly recommend getting the diagnosis for a lot of reasons. For me, it was just about that clarity it was just about, okay, now I can go forward and look at management. I can look at, if I need to look at medication, I can look at medication. But people who are in the wrong fit, in the wrong job, basically, if they're undiagnosed, it's very difficult for them to navigate a lot of this. And it frustrates employers, it frustrates the managers.
And they, when they come to me and say, Marianne, I have to work for someone that gives me some freedom. I cannot work for a micromanager. All right.
Right.
People know that, and they tell me that when I go to place them on a job or send them on interviews. I keep that in mind because certain people have to have managers that give them more freedom. Now, like I said, as a career consultant for many, many years, I think you're doing some really important, powerful work that will help so many people. And we're coming here near the end, and you brought out so many good points, but I always like to leave listeners with 2 salient points. So if you had to give those to our listeners, what would those 2 points be for people that are challenged with ADHD?
I would say if you are challenged with ADHD and you are unclear about the right direction for you or the right fit, you need to go through a process to define what it is that you want and what it is that is important to you in your work, and to be able to articulate that, be able to have the words. Now you have the words and the confidence. Okay. That's number one. And the other one is to find a subject or a field that you can work within that really resonates with you. Because you can take those skills that you have and plug them into almost any field. You could do menial work in a field where you're being surrounded by people that are fascinating to you, and you can learn more about that subject or that field. So find a subject or field that you can work within. That would be my other recommendation.
Those are great points. Okay, so if people want to get a hold of you, if they want to find your book, is it on Amazon, or how do they do that, or how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I prefer you go to my website, which is Career Coaching with Shell, SHELL.com, and click on course book, and you can get it there. I think that there might still be the 15% discount. Or you can go on Amazon and get it. Absolutely. You can get it on Amazon. It just was launched in January. So yeah, the reviews are just starting to come now, which is nice. There's some really good reviews on there already, which is nice.
Great. Well, I've looked at it somewhat, but I can't wait to read it. This has been wonderful, Shell, and I think you've given our listeners such good information. And for all you people out there, if you're challenged right now to find a job, you're having a hard time, you're not feeling like you're in alignment, a book like this might really help you in many, many ways. So check it out. And Shell does wonderful work, all right? I highly recommend it. So Shell, tell us that website again. What is it called?
www.careercoachingwithshell.com.
Okay, great. Well, all of this information will be on my website, faremouth.com as well. And Shell, I really appreciate you taking the time out today to come on Career Can Do. I think the world of you, and I think you're doing such important work in the new work world. So thank you again. And I certainly hope we can keep in touch, because I know I can probably refer some people to you that would really benefit from your service. So thank you all for tuning in to Career Can Do. Make sure you download us. We're on all major podcast channels. We come out twice a month, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye. Thanks again, Shell.
Thank you so much.
We thank you for tuning in to our Career Can Do podcast. We make no guarantees on results for your particular quest, but we hope you enjoy the information presented. The views and opinions expressed in this program are solely that of the guest or speaker and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of Mary Ann Faremouth and Faremouth and Company. Thank you.